Next we discuss is air pollution. So air pollution, this can be caused by forest fires, volcanic eruptions, can be caused by forest fires, volcanic eruptions, biological decay, and of course human activities. So it can be caused by biological decay, human activities, and volcanic eruptions, and forest fires. Now human activities include, so human activities include the release of exhaust from motor vehicles.
So, why is car exhaust bad? Car exhaust contains gases such as carbon monoxide, benzene, and sulfur dioxide, which have been known to contribute to air pollution. Air pollution can cause cancers, birth
Then
defects,
can include
asthma, emphysema, and bronchitis. It has even been known
exhaust from power plants.
This is Drax, a coal-fired power plant in England. The size of 2 Manhattan Central Parks side by side.
Other factories and the mining industry, which often needs explosions to extract different materials from the Earth's surface or beneath the Earth's surface, and obviously the use of CFCs, or you are familiar with this, chlorofluorocarbons, in foam packing, cooling agents in foam packing, cooling agents, and aerosol sprays. So these are how air pollution is being caused by human activities. Next we have air pollution due to sulfur dioxide and air pollution due to oxides of carbon and oxides of nitrogen. So human activities include this. Pollution due to air pollution due to sulfur dioxide, it's released from burning low-grade petroleum fuels and coal from power plants and factories and mining centers. So once it's released, it goes up into the environment and then it gets mixed with clouds to form acid rain, and that comes down and hampers with the pH of the soil. Obviously, soil has a particular pH because soil has a plethora of organisms that live there, microorganisms and other types of organisms. So their lifestyle and their metabolism, everything is affected by this acid rain. Sulfur dioxide is an acidic gas.
And fossil fuels combustion.
So SO2.
Coal, crude oil, and natural gases are fossil fuels, and it contains sulfur. When burnt, sulfur is converted to sulfur dioxide. What does sulfur dioxide do to our environment? Sulfur dioxide released from volcanic eruptions may react with water vapor
To form
in the atmosphere to form sulfur-based particles. These particles reflect the sun's
acid rain.
space and temporarily cool the earth for periods of time.
So it's an acidic gas, it forms acid rain. In humans, it affects or irritates the airways and the lining of the lungs. So it can cause breathing problems as well. Prolonged exposure to sulfur dioxide can even cause lung cancer and other sort of respiratory illnesses such as bronchitis. So this is air pollution due to sulfur dioxide, and then you have air pollution due to the oxides of carbon, and air pollution due to oxides of carbon, in which carbon monoxide is the lethal one. So air pollution due to oxides of nitrogen and oxides of carbon. So oxides of carbon, what happens there? Main source is carbon monoxide from exhaust gases that binds irreversibly with hemoglobin to form carboxyhemoglobin that reduces the oxygen carrying capacity of next. We will talk about how to reduce this air pollution that we were talking about the sulfur dioxides and the nitrogen dioxides and the carbon dioxides. So ways to reduce air pollution. And there are several ways that we can do is use, first of all, use renewable energy, avoid burning fossil fuels. We have electric cars now, we have hydroelectric power, we have wind generation, we have power generation from waves. So we are looking at in other renewable sources of energy. So world is moving towards that, and hopefully one day we will be able to use 100% renewable energy. But that's a long way off, because it deals with a lot of there are a lot of factors. So governments have to include, our lifestyle has to change, our demand for energy is increasing day by day. So corporations and companies are trying. So use renewable energy, avoid burning fossil fuels, use, for right now, use catalytic converters, use catalytic converters in cars that will not release the harmful gases. And we can ensure proper maintenance, ensure proper maintenance of chimneys and exhaust of factories and industries. So we can do that. So these are the ways to reduce air pollution. Next we talk about is water pollution. Water pollution is one of the major concerns that we have right now, since population is growing, and in overcrowded countries and cities and communities, it's particularly a problem, because due to water pollution we have a lot of waterborne diseases such as cholera that causes diarrhea and dysentery and all that. So water pollution, so what is water pollution? And this is caused by treating water bodies as a dumping place for garbage and untreated sewage, and also the release of chemicals such as insecticides and pesticides. So when we release that, they get the water bodies get polluted, so it becomes a dumping ground actually for all our waste material. So that becomes a problem. Then we can talk about individually pollution by sewage. So pollution by sewage, there are other types of pollutions as well. Pollution by inorganic waste from factories and fertilizers and all that. So pollution by sewage. Sewage contains organic matter in feces and urine. So if it's not treated properly, it can cause pollution. It affects water bodies. It affects water bodies by causing. It affects water bodies and, well, it affects water bodies and causes diseases such as cholera and causes dysentery, actually not dysentery, dysentery. All right, and then it can also causes eutrophication. This is very important. This comes in the exam often, and we have to learn the process of eutrophication, how that is happening. So it causes eutrophication, overgrowth of algae and other water plants. So we are going to see how this eutrophication process actually takes place. So we are going to have a flow chart, and that really helps. So process of eutrophication now. So eutrophication. So what actually happens is you have, I'm going to write it in a flow chart. So untreated sewage and runoff fertilizers. So untreated sewage and runoff fertilizers contains nitrogenous substances that help growth of algae and other water plants. There is a name to this process. Okay, so this is called algal bloom, blooming of lot of algae, kochuripana type. So this is called algal bloom, and algae have a short lifespan, and as it dies, it gets decayed by decomposers. Now remember, decomposers are everywhere. They are microbes, obviously, so they're found everywhere. So the decomposers are also in water. So the algae have a short lifespan, and as it dies, it gets decayed and decayed by decomposers, which grow in number and aerobically respire using up oxygen. So the microorganisms, they are decomposing the algae or the other water plants that have actually died. So since there is a algal bloom, since there is a lot of algae, lot of plants, that is the reason why the decomposers are feeding on them, and they're growing in numbers, and when they do, they are aerobically respiring using up oxygen. So what that leads to is depletion of oxygen occurs, and fish and other aquatic organisms start to die. They are also decomposed by microbes or decomposers and enhances the effect. So it enhances the effect, and as a result, this entire process of amplification or the worsening of the situation, this is what is called eutrophication. So when you write answers, please mention about algal bloom, mention about the depletion of oxygen that leads to the death and death of other fish and aquatic marine life or aquatic organisms. And when they die, their bodies are also decomposed. So again, more decomposers, more oxygen, and it becomes a very messy, stinky, very unsightly area over there. And this is called eutrophication process. And during this, over here, when the oxygen is being depleted, there is something called biochemical oxygen demand, and this is what is used by scientists and microbiologists in particular to assess how polluted an environment is. So if your oxygen demand is very high, that means bacteria and decomposers are working overtime, and they can only do that when there is too much death and decay, and there is too much nitrogenous substance from runoff waters, and insecticides and pesticides are running, and fertilizers as well. So contains nitrogenous substance, runoff fertilizers as well. So all these chemical substances causes that oxygen demand to increase. As a result, it measures the amount of pollution there is. So next, what we are going to write at this moment, please pause the video and write this in a manner that I have written, and do mention the important points in your answers.
Eutrophication is a process that can happen in a water body, like a river or lake, when too many nutrients are added to the system. Eutrophication starts when fertilizers, which are rich in nutrients like nitrate and phosphate, are washed into the river or lake system. This leads to an increase in nutrient concentrations in the water. The nutrients are food for algae, and the algae grow and reproduce quickly, forming a thick green bloom in the water. This algal bloom will absorb sunlight shining on the water, so the sunlight can't reach the bottom. Plants who need this light to photosynthesize will die. The algae will also start to die when they eat up all of the nutrients and run out of food. Next, bacteria start to break down the dead plants and algae, and that releases more nutrients back into the water continuing the algal bloom cycle. The bacteria, with a continuing supply of food, reproduce into much larger numbers, consuming oxygen as they grow and respire. There's not much oxygen in the water to begin with, so when the bacteria consume it quickly, it might run out completely. Water without oxygen is called anoxic. If the water turns anoxic, all non-bacterial life in the water, including fish and other animals, will die. So, eutrophication happens when nutrients are added to water, which causes an algal bloom, cutting off sunlight and feeding bacteria. The bacteria use up oxygen in the water, which becomes anoxic, causing everything living in the water to die. Eutrophication is one reason why we need to be careful with fertilizers when we're growing crops.
And due to this depletion of oxygen, we have something called the biochemical oxygen demand, or BOD. This is not exactly in the syllabus, so you can skip this part, or if you're interested, you can study this. I haven't seen a question on biochemical oxygen demand, but it may be related, or you may need it in the future. So biochemical oxygen demand, or it's known as BOD, biochemical oxygen demand, is used to measure the pollution of water bodies by microorganisms. Pollution of water bodies by microorganisms. And here so this is known as BOD. So if it decreases water pollution, so if it's decreasing water pollution, it's going to have a low reading, and if it's increasing water pollution, it's going to have a high reading. So this is about biochemical oxygen demand. And we can also have pollution by inorganic waste from factories. So we can have pollution by inorganic ions from factories. We can also have pollution by fertilizers, as we already have mentioned over there in the eutrophication process. Pollution by fertilizers, and they have to be used excessively, and obviously pollution due to pesticides. So it can be due to pesticides, it can be due to herbicides, fungicides, anything that destroys all these organisms. So pollution due to pesticides, these are sprayed on crop plants to get rid of microorganisms that actually feed and destroy crop plants. So pollution due to pesticides, again, if used excessively, such as DDT, dieldrin. So pesticides such as DDT and dieldrin. So this was about water pollution, and the way we can prevent water pollution is obviously by using treating sewage before they're being dumped into water bodies. We can have we use less of pesticides and less of herbicides and all that. Fertilizers are given in the correct amount. Right now we are going through a revolution in the genetic engineering field, so we have a lot of genetically modified plants, and they have their drawbacks and they have their advantages as well. We learn all this in class 12. There is a chapter detailed, chapter 19, gene technology. So we study all these genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, and genetically modified crops, GMCs. So over there, so we can rely on them. We have actually stopped using DDTs and DLRINs because they are non-biodegradable and they really cause harm to the environment and causes eutrophication and all that. We use sodium glyphosate instead. So we are trying to move away from all these pollutions and all polluting the environment. So this is about that. Next we are going to discuss about conservation, and then we are going to end up with and the chapter with talking about recyclable materials and why do we have to recycle materials, and use some examples.